The Razer Blade 18 delivers on everything you'd expect out of a beefy gaming laptop, along with a few cool features, including the world's first 18-inch dual-mode display. But nothing's perfect, and this is no exception. Switching resolutions is anything but seamless, and it costs about 500,000 pretty pennies. Yeah, 500,000 of them. There are 4 different configurations offered of the Blade 18, all of which use the same display, an Intel Core Ultra 9 275HX 24-core CPU. The base option gives you a 5070 Ti, 32GB of DDR5 5600 RAM, and a 1TB SSD. The next step up is a 5080 with the same memory and storage. And then there's 2 5090 versions, one with the same 32GB of RAM as the others, but double the storage. And finally, you can upgrade to 64GB of RAM, still at the 5600 speed, and double the storage again with an additional 2TB SSD, where all the others just have an empty expandable slot. The specific version we're testing is the top of the line 5090 64 gigs of RAM and double 2TB SSDs. And while it definitely rips at gaming, there's a few caveats along the way. And in case you want one of these for yourselves, we're actually going to be giving away this specific model over on our Twitch channel in the near future. Currently, we're running a giveaway for a desktop PC with the 5090, but this will make its way into one of the giveaways at least at some point this year. Now, the display is a 16x10 18-inch dual-mode IPS display that can run either 240Hz at 2400p or 440Hz at 1200p. It utilizes G-Sync, covers 100% of the DCI-P3 color space, and is Kalman verified, meaning each panel is calibrated for color accuracy from the factory for the best out-of-the-box eyeball experience possible. The 2 resolution modes both look great, as even the 1200p is close to the pixel density of a 32-inch 4K monitor, and the amount of detail the 2400p is able to produce is stunning, albeit overkill 99% of the time, unless you're doing graphic design or something similar on a regular basis. The other thing to keep in mind is when switching between resolutions, the entire laptop has to restart, so it does take a minute, and you give Windows the opportunity to interrupt you with a pesky update. With that in mind, while it may just be personal preference, it would be nice for them to offer a traditional OLED option like they have in the 14 and 16-inch Blade laptops. Now, while we say it does require a restart in order to change resolutions, we are just talking if you want to get that higher refresh rate at 1200p. Otherwise, it's locked down. It requires a full reboot. And as for ports, this thing's got it all. 3 USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type A ports, a Thunderbolt 5 that supports DisplayPort 2.1 via the 5090, a Thunderbolt 4 that can display out through the integrated graphics, and both Thunderbolt ports support charging with Power Delivery 3.0, or up to 100 watts. There's also an HDMI 2.1 port, a 3.5mm audio jack, UHS 2 SD card reader, 2.5 gigabit Ethernet, Wi-Fi 7, and Bluetooth 5.4 for anything else you need to connect. There are 6 speakers in total, 2 tweeters and 4 subwoofers, being driven by 3 smart amps controlled by THX spatial audio that have specific immersive or competitive modes depending on how sweaty you're feeling. Now, if you're a mega perspirator who doesn't mind risking a vac ban, the almost full-size keyboard does support rapid trigger mode and snap tap for controversial but faster responses, especially when strafing. The keyboard also has a full numpad, per key RGB, and dual LED backlighting, which react when holding down the shift or function key to only light up whatever function that key press will have, and make it clear whether numlock is on or off without having a separate indicator light. When it is off, you get access to the standard home and page up and down and directional keys, but also a mute button, power mode hotkey, the game mode key, which can be configured to lock out the Windows key, Alt Tab, Alt F4, and more, and then 4 programmable macro keys for whatever your heart desires, and a trackpad toggle. The dual LED backlighting is just, I think, should become a standard in the industry. It is such a brilliant design. I love how Razer's implemented it. It is flawless. When you hit shift, it's immediate response time to get the various different options flashing between the LEDs. And while it is nice to disable the trackpad entirely, especially when you bust out a mouse, most of the time you shouldn't have to, as it has Razer's enhanced palm reject technology. And it works so well to the point that I didn't have to think about avoiding the trackpad at all as I used it. And while the material and amount of travel is great, I will say trying to right click wasn't the most consistent. What has stayed consistent though is the looks. The simple flat design with the logo slapped right in the center hasn't changed. This year it is only available in black, so all you light mode heathens are out of luck. The CNC milled aluminum chassis did get a redesign, maintaining its status as the thinnest 18-inch HX class laptop at just over an inch thick, 10.84 inches deep, and 15.74 inches wide. The anodized black finish also has a fingerprint resistant coating, which does help a good amount. And I also discovered that Razer sells skins for these things, and when I purchased the laptop, it came with a free back skin and their RGB monitor stand, for whatever reason. It weighs 7.06 pounds, which actually is on the lighter side when it comes to 5090 laptops, and they were able to fit a 99 watt-hour battery in, which is on the massive side, and lets you watch up to 3 hours of YouTube or play games for an hour and 15 minutes at 1200p, 60 hertz, and 50% brightness. After you kill it, if you use the 400 watt power brick, it can charge back to 50% in as little as 35 minutes. 400 watts! I remember back when the MSI Titan had 2 power bricks to deliver that much power. And when it comes to cooling, it also has an overhauled vapor chamber that covers 57% of the motherboard, Honeywell thermal gel, 0.075 millimeter fins, and 3 fans to keep the CPU and GPU running at 86 and 70 degrees Celsius respectively while gaming. And then there's also a thermal hood that allows them to fit bigger rear fans, and it has an RGB lit window for you to peek at the innards, except it's not real. Seriously, while at first glance it looks like the back of the PCB, it's actually just decorative printing on the vapor chamber, and they put what looks like to be a graphite pad with some designs over the RAM, just so you don't see the bright green sticks through the window. To be clear, none of this is a bad thing, and it does look good. It just feels a little goofy, and also it's on the bottom of the... How often are you looking at that? I feel like I'm gonna scratch up the window. Now, the specific version we're testing today is the top of the line trim with the 5090 64 gigs of RAM and double 2TB SSD. That costs, and you might want to sit down for this, $5,200 US dollar wallers. Turns out I am not good with money. And if you go with any other version, the price ranges from $3,500 to $4,900. And as mentioned at the beginning, it will have a spare M.2 slot. So if you want to take out the 10 tiny T5 Torx screws and get into the guts, you are able to upgrade or add an SSD and update the RAM. Both the M.2 slots support up to an 8TB Gen 4 or 4TB Gen 5 drive, and the RAM is upgradable to 96GB at 5600 megatransfers or 64 gigs at 6400 megatransfers. Now, regarding performance, the Blade 18 has 4 different modes: Turbo, Performance, Balanced, and Silent. We're going to focus on Performance mode as it wasn't much louder than Balanced, and as for Turbo, it kinda sucks. Turbo gave very small, if any, boost to performance while being much louder. So again, performance seems like the most likely mode to be used 90% of the time. But we did do some testing with every mode. And a quick reminder, this laptop has 2 resolutions, 3840 by 2400 and 1920 by 1200, which, if you aren't familiar, are just 16 by 10 aspect ratio versions of 4K and 1080p. Starting off with some performance mode highlights. At 2400p ultra settings, no upscaling, we've got Monster Hunter Wilds with 50 FPS average with 34 FPS 1% and 25 FPS 0.1% lows, Horizon Forbidden West with 59 FPS average, 28 FPS 1% and 14 0.1% lows, and God of War Ragnarok with an average of 80 FPS, 63 on the 1% lows and 53 on the 0.1% lows. And as for the other power modes, compared to the 50 FPS performance we got in Monster Hunter Wilds, Turbo got up to a 51 FPS average with 35 FPS 1% and 26.1% lows for a 1 FPS gain all around. Balanced went down to 47 FPS average, about 3 FPS worse, and Silent got a 41 average, going down about 9 frames. If we switch the display mode to 1200p and stay in Monster Hunter Wilds, performance got 94 FPS on average, Turbo got 98, Balance got 90, and Silent got 79. That change in performance is also a change in power draw, although it's not a huge deal as every mode besides Balance can only be used when plugged in, but for those of you who are curious, hold on to your butts. As stated before, performance mode had the CPU at 86 degrees Celsius, the GPU at 70 degrees, and took a combined 2 210 watts of power. The reason we're combining the power draw is depending on the game and whether it's GPU or CPU heavy, the power can be shared differently, but the total amount of power used is the same as decided by the mode you're using. So back to the numbers. Turbo took 220 watts with the CPU at 86 and the GPU at 70. Balance took 178 with the CPU at 82 and the GPU at 71. And Silent took 129 and kept the CPU at a much cooler 71 degrees and the GPU at 67. And now that we've covered the side effects, here's the main results of the different modes. We tested each mode in 3 games in both 2400p and 1200p with ray tracing on and off and some upscaling thrown in. And performance mode got 56 FPS average. Turbo mode got an average of 58 FPS, a 3% gain. Balanced averaged 53 FPS, about a 5% drop. And Silent got an average of 46 FPS, losing about 17% of its average, and its 1% performance and 0.1% lows lost about 30%, meaning you can expect a lot more stutters or frames hanging. And for the mountain of numbers we have to get through, our full 20 game tests in performance mode and ultra settings with ray tracing mixed throughout, it got an average of 64 FPS with 44.1% and 33.1% lows in 2400p, and in 1200p it averaged 139 FPS with 73.1% and 44.1% lows. All in all, if you can get past the around $5,000 price tag and the portability drawbacks an 18-incher has, both of which are pretty standard when it comes to 5090 laptops, and resetting the computer to switch resolutions, if you get past those, you'll have a killer PC with a sleek design, amazing display, and peripherals that's as thin and light as they get and can play any game that you want. The only things you may be missing is some more RGB and the gold that used to be buried in your backyard. The Razer Blade 18 honestly provides a massive package, having essentially everything that you could want. I do still think that the dual mode displays are mostly a gimmick. It's very difficult to imagine a scenario where people need that high of a refresh rate at a high resolution like 2400p, but also need 440 Hz at 1200p. It just feels like it's a showcase of technology rather than a practical usability thing, and I would much rather have an OLED display, as mentioned, versus the dual mode display that we have on this. But we do have reviews coming out of the Razer Blade 16 and the 14 moving forward, which again, as mentioned, both have OLED panels, and the Razer Blade 16 does do a lot that the Razer Blade 18 does, but again, in a smaller package. So you can get subscribed to stay up to date on those videos. They should be coming out shortly. Again, we're planning on giving away the Razer Blade 18 over on our Twitch channel at some point this year. It's not quite clear when that's happening, just due to the international move that's happening, but we will make sure that somebody from our community is able to get this Razer Blade 18 and all of the goodness that's inside of it.